is the award-winning Speak Your Piece with Darren Dudrick on 1400 AM, 96.7 FM KODI, and 1140 AM KZMQ.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Darren Dudrick. If you have a comment or a question, you may call us at 587-1400 or 1-866-833-4400. Speak Your Piece is brought to you by Tim Mayhew of Level 4 Wealth Management in downtown KODI. Call today for a no-cost, no-obligation consultation, 586-2700. Also brought to you in part by First Bank of Wyoming, your home lending partner in town. Mountain High Health Foods for health foods, vitamins, herbs, books, anything for healthy living. Stop by Mountain High Health Foods, top of the hill in KODI, and Wyoming Home and Ranch. They have a great selection of dog food, home decor, and the best lawn and garden section in town. Stop into Wyoming Home and Ranch on Bighorn Avenue in KODI for tools, products, and expert advice for all your projects. Once again, the phone number is 587-1400 or 1-866-833-4400. When calling U.S. callers, please tell us your first and last name. We limit callers to one call per show. Today on Speak Your Piece, we're going to be talking about Convention of States. In the studio with me, I have State Representative Dan Laursen of Powell, and over the phone, I have former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, a Republican from Oklahoma. Gentlemen, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Darren.
Doing great.
Thanks for joining us, Dan, and Senator. Thanks for calling in and getting on the air with us. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it.
And we're talking, as I mentioned, a convention of states. And before we dive into exactly what that is, so the listeners get a full idea what that is, we want to just, if we can, just give the listeners an idea who both of you are. And most people listening probably know both of you, but just in case, we'll give them a little bit of a background. We'll start with you, Senator. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, the first thing is I was born in Wyoming. That's the best thing about my biography. I'm a 69-year-old retired physician who served 6 years in the House of Representatives, went back to my practice for 4 years, and got pushed into going to the Senate. I spent 10 out of the 12 years I was elected there. I left 2 years early because I came to the conclusion that the problems facing our country aren't going to be fixed by the career politicians in Washington, and that we as individuals had to take it into our hands to actually change things. And so other than I was a businessman before I went to medical school. I was an old man. I was known as Grandpa in my med school class. I've delivered over 4,000 babies and taken care of grandmas to broken bones to gallbladders to women who are pregnant, to elderly folks who need love and kindness as they pass on. So I've had a great career and a great privilege the greatest privilege was being a physician. Second would be to be able to represent the people of Oklahoma in the Senate and the House. So I've had a fun and interesting last 20-some years. And I probably wouldn't trade it, but I know we have to fix our country, and there's not a way to fix it other than what our founders gave us.
Representative Laursen, how about you? A lot of people around here know who you are. Most people probably do, but go ahead and give us your background.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I also was born in Wyoming. I was born in Laramie. I lived in Wyoming for all but about 3 years, probably, when I was younger. And I've been in Powell area since 1968, when I moved here with my mother and father and my siblings. I graduated in the Powell schools and went to Northwest and graduated there, and then went to UW along with my wife and my kids. So Wyoming's a great place to live, obviously. I got elected to the House legislature. Sorry about that. 3 years ago. So, and it's been quite an education. Great to have the local other representatives in the area help you through the struggles of learning legislating, and great to be here. Excited to be part of this Convention of States project, and ready to go.
Senator Coburn, can you give our listeners just a background on what exactly is a Convention of States, and how did you become interested in it?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, they need to know the history of our country. All our states and colonies, and many times after the actual Constitutional Convention, used conventions of states to change things or to address problems. As a matter of fact, the Constitutional Convention came out of an Annapolis Convention of States. It was called by Virginia and a couple other states. So what the history is during the Constitutional Convention, everything was argued. I actually put a book out called Smashing the D.C. Monopoly. But I studied Madison, all his notes at the convention, and the only thing that wasn't argued vociferously in everything that they did was that Article 5 of the Constitution, which allows the states to call an amendments convention to fix things. And Colonel George Mason stood up at that time and said, "Gentlemen, we're about to make a grievous error. Do you know any time in history where a government has voluntarily ceded power back to its citizenry?" And, of course, there was none. There has been none. And he said, we have to figure out a way in this Constitution to make sure the states have the ability to control the federal government rather than the federal government control the states. And so they put Article 5 in. And when Article 5 was originally put in, it didn't have an option for the Congress to modify the Constitution. It only had an option for the states. So what they did is they allowed the states, if 2/3 of the states agree that they ought to call an amendments convention, and it has to be specific. In other words, you can't just say we want a convention. You have to say what you want the convention for, and then you have to have 2/3 of the other states, which is 34, agree with you that those three subjects, like we have, ought to be discussed in amendments to the Constitution, potentially offered to the states. And so they gave us this way of controlling power. You know, I left Washington really disappointed because I'd worked hard. I'd identified $400 billion of waste every year, fraud. And everybody, all the members of the Senate agreed with it, but none of them would help me get rid of it. And that's when I realized that the courage it's going to take to fix our country, it doesn't reside in Washington. It resides with Americans. The average American citizen who loves our country, loves freedom, loves liberty, and wants us to stay a republic, but we want a limited federal government rather than an overwhelming behemoth that tells us what to do rather than the American people telling the federal government what to do. We have a way to fix it, and this is the way.
When you were in the Senate and even in the House, did you bring this up a lot, or was it brought up by your colleagues at any time at Convention of States?
No, I brought it up as I was leaving. I offered more amendments in the 10 years in the Senate than any other senator, and in the last 4 years more than all the other senators combined, trying to limit the federal government, trying to restore the rights of the states to have control. You know, in the state of Wyoming, 60% of the budget that Wyoming raises in Wyoming for your state government is mandated how it'll be spent by a federal bureaucrat that wasn't ever elected to anything.
That's crazy.
And you just think about that for a minute, that even people in Wyoming don't get to decide how they'll spend their own money for their own state government 60% of the time. And so we've gone way past neutral with the federal government. And remember what history shows us. History shows us that all republics prior to us have died. They've gone away. And the reason they've gone away is they lost control of their finances, and they were spending money that they didn't have on things they didn't absolutely need. And so we've even gone further than that. We're now at about 180% of GDP with direct debt, but our unfunded liabilities are $144 trillion, which is $24 trillion more than the entire net worth of the country. And the average millennial over the next 50 years will lose $30,000 in standard of living, either by the Federal Reserve printing more money or through inflation or actually direct loss of earning power to cover what has already been spent and already been promised. So what we've done is we've set it up to cheat our children and to cheat especially this 85 million millennials who are kind of clueless about what's going on in the country and what's getting ready to happen to them. And we ought to be concerned about that as freedom-loving Americans, and especially as parents and grandparents. We ought to be doing something about it. And the question I would say, Darren, we ought to be asking, and Dan, we ought to be asking is, who in Washington right now is working on a balanced budget amendment?
Well, they say
Nobody.
they are, but I don't think they are.
Well, who? Name them.
Yeah, you're a good question.
Yeah, okay, that's number one. And number two, who's worried, who's figured out a way to fix Medicare?
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody?
Yeah.
And who's worried about this debt limit increase that's getting ready to be passed, which most of the R's are going to vote for that. Some won't. But I never voted for a debt limit increase once while I was there because the debt limit increase doesn't mean anything because they always raise the debt limit.
Yeah.
So it's never not been raised. Why not take this $400 billion that everybody knows, the Government Accountability Office knows, that you could get rid of and do that first? But what I found out is duplication and waste has a constituency, and that most members of Congress end up being cowards when it comes to making hard choices. So we have to put them in a box. We have to give them a balanced budget amendment that says you have to use general accounting practices. We have to limit the scope and jurisdiction of the federal government so that they can't continue to spend money. And finally, we need to put term limits on appointed members of Congress and the judiciary. The first 150 years of our country, the average service time of a federal judge was 7 years. It's now 30.
Yeah.
They've lost contact with freedom and liberty and the meaning of the real Constitution. And the Constitution isn't that little paper fold over that we carry in our pockets. It weighs 82 pounds now, and that's called the Annotated Constitution. It has all the court decisions that go against our freedom and our federalism. It has all the bureaucratic rules and regulations that limit our ability to decide as states what we're going to do. Think about how much land's owned by the federal government in Wyoming and how much control you all have over it. Not much.
Not much. No, you're right.
Yeah, but it's your land.
That's right.
It's your land. It's not the federal government's land. It's your land. And yet you lose all the resource value out of it. You lose all the real estate taxes. And then you have some bureaucrat who's never done anything in their life except sit at a desk in Washington and tell you what you'll do with it.
You know, Senator, I want to get Dan's thoughts on the Convention of States. Before I do, I just want to your quick thoughts on the Republicans in both the House and the Senate that had all this time, 7-8 years to think of a health care plan and have been able to get nothing accomplished. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I don't think Washington fixes health care. I think markets fix health care. The average CT scan at a hospital, especially one that's vertically and horizontally integrated, like a lot of the charity hospitals and a lot of the for-profit hospitals, costs 7 times more than what you're getting done as an outpatient. Recent studies showed from Brookings and AEI and several other institutes that have renowned qualities, that the cost of health care because of this mergers and vertical and horizontal integration in the health care, they have caused the cost of health care to rise 27% with no benefit. So to answer your question shortly, the way to fix health care is mandate that all prices be transparent.
That's right.
Everybody that participates.
That's right.
And everybody gets charged the same. If you have the same procedure done, you get charged the same thing. Because as soon as markets are out there, then there'll be a quality transparency. As soon as you can have price discovery for a cost of health care, then all of a sudden the way they'll compete is on quality and outcomes. And there's great examples all across the country of where this is working and working well. And so the markets will solve this problem. And the people always say, well, what about the people that fall through the hoops, fall through the safety net? Well, they're falling through now.
Yeah.
And we're spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And what the studies show us is if you have Medicaid, your outcomes suck.
Interesting.
So we're promising them care. They can't get access. And we're calling it Medicaid, aid to medicine. But the real thing is if we give them an IRA or a medical savings account and let them decide what they're going to do and have to buy a catastrophic policy, And then we'd start having price discovery. We'd start having competition based on price and quality, and we'd solve our healthcare problem. I'm convinced that the price of healthcare would go down 35% across the board in this country.
Well, what we need to do, Senator, is get you back into Washington. Can we do that?
I don't think so.
Nice try. Huh?
You can't fix it there.
Well,
Well, look at what's happening in Washington now.
The politicians just don't understand that, though.
Well, they espouse conservative principles, but when you ask them to go vote for it, they don't.
That's right. Right.
So what's the problem there? The problem is they'd rather be elected and stay in a position of power than do the hard choices that are necessary for our future.
Dan,
that's disgusting.
Let's get your thoughts on the Convention of States before we take a break. Just your thoughts and how did you get involved with this from the Wyoming side?
When I first got elected, this is one of the first topics I started looking into, and specifically the balanced budget amendment resolution that we did get passed last session, which is a great accomplishment. Right now, I think there's 27 states on that. That also ties into the Convention of States project, and the main focus there is to get 2/3 of the states in the nation, that'd be 34, to pass a resolution calling for a convention of states. And then we were going to discuss the 3 specific areas that Senator Coburn had talked about, calling for term limits on federal officials and members of Congress, and such as judges, rein in the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government, and have fiscal restraints, and maybe do a balanced budget amendment or type of discussion, discuss taxes and how they might be raised. Would you have Congress have to pass that by 2/3 vote or something? Make it difficult for them to pass more taxes.
What's the general consensus that you get in the state legislature regarding a convention of states?
We didn't. In the last 3 years, it has been brought up. I've been a co-sponsor, haven't been the sponsor. Representative Winters is the one that brings it up, and I appreciate him doing that. And I think we'll probably do it again. I hope this session. It'll be very difficult, being it's a budget session, and it'll require a 2/3 vote just to get it on the floor. But at least we'll be talking about it again. Senator Coburn came to Cheyenne, before session last year, and I hope maybe we'll get him here again to discuss this with the legislators and have a night where we can present the facts and how the abuse of the federal government is, it's just out of control. Well, go ahead.
No, I just want to say we're going to take a break, and then we'll talk more about this on the other side. If you'd like to join the conversation today we're talking about the Convention of States with State Representative Dan Laursen of Powell, along with former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. Give us a call, 587-1400. We'll be back with more Speak Your Piece right after these messages. We are back on Speak Your Piece. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Darren Dudrick. Today we're talking about a Convention of States in the studio. I have State Representative Dan Laursen of Powell, and over the phone we have former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call, 587-1400. The website, conventionofstates.com. It's the Convention of States project that was founded by the Citizens for Self-Governance for the purpose of stopping the runaway power of the federal government. And the goal is to propose amendments to the Constitution that would curb the abuses of the federal government. Senator, how many states right now do we have aboard the Convention of States?
12 have passed. It's filed in 37 others to be acted upon. We have 2.4 million volunteers helping us. We have a legislative director or captain in every legislative precinct, all volunteers. So we're working. This is a high bar. Look, to get 34 states to agree about anything is pretty difficult. But what is important is how do you fix our country? And will Washington fix it? And if not, when I travel, I get people to smile all the time because Pew Research says over 90% of Americans don't trust the federal government, and for good reason. So when you ask, you talk to them about it, and they'll say, "Oh, aren't you Senator Coburn?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you think of the mess?" I said, "You can fix it." And they said, "What? You can fix it?" And then I tell them about Article 5. And and saying, if you want to fix it, you can't complain anymore. There's a way our founders gave us to fix our government. And you can't just do it with a balanced budget because they'll cheat. They're cheating now, and they'll cheat then. But then all of a sudden they smile and say, you mean I can actually do something about this? And I said, yeah. And here's your state director. Here's the people that in your county, and I forward all that information to them. I said, go online and look at conventionofstates.com. Read Smash in the D.C. Republic, because all it is about Article 5, what our founders said, what they thought, where we are today and where we should be today, and how we secure the future of our kids. So this is kind of a fun deal to me. I'm actually working on something I think is going to actually solve the problems for my kids and grandkids. And you can't complain anymore. Complaining doesn't work. You can't yell at the TV. What you have to do is get up off your rear end and join us, and we're going to create 10 to 20 million volunteers around this country saying we want our country back, and we want to start telling Washington what to do rather than some bureaucrat in Washington telling us what to do.
We want to break this down so the people can understand this. So, Dan, you take it to the state level. You present it to, in your case, the House. It gets passed by the House. Does it have to get passed by the Senate, or how does that work?
Yes, definitely. It has to be passed by the Senate, and hopefully they don't add amendments or change it too much. I mean, these resolutions all need to be similar, and I think Senator Coburn mentioned that if they aren't similar, then Congress can, at the federal level, can say that we don't have 34 because they're not all similar in text. Yes,
that's part of the problem with our balanced budget amendment, guys. I'm all for a balanced budget, but only 20 of them aggregate of the 27 that passed, which means when Congress looks at it, they'll say, well, hey, you don't need 7 more. You need 14 more. And so plus the fact that you got to do all 3 things if you're going to fix the country.
So if it passes the state House and the state Senate, that means Wyoming's now aboard.
That's right.
And we're just waiting for the rest of the states.
Waiting for 34 total to get there. And at that point, Congress will have to set a time and a place for a convention of states and where we'll meet. And it'll be a big, big deal. I mean, there'll be press there. It'll be just amazing. And in our state will send delegates. All the states will decide how they will select their delegates and how many they'll send. I did have a bill passed last session, and it essentially was a Delegate Limitation Act. And I think this is a big worry of a lot of people, is that the convention will get out of hand and will bring up ideas that weren't in the resolutions of the state. They say they bring up doing away with the Second Amendment or something like that.
Can I address that?
Yeah, because there is a worry about that. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, except it's the argument that has no teeth. First of all, there's lots of jurisprudence on amendment conventions that the only thing that can be considered is what is applied for. That's number one. But let's say we send a whole bunch of crazies and we get something that's outside of what we've applied for. Congress will never send it to the states.
Right.
Because Congress will get sued if, in fact, they send it to the states because it violates the critical components required in our Constitution for an amendments convention. And then the third thing is to affirm any constitutional amendment. 38 states have to agree. So you have to pretty well assume that all of our state legislatures are filled with idiots that would allow part of the Bill of Rights to be taken away. And all it takes is 13 judiciary chairmen in either the House or the Senate in 50 states to stop anything from happening. So, it's just totally false propaganda that anything like that can happen.
Because I think the fear is that there's some far left individuals in the Senate and the House. They're going to try to maybe do away with the Second Amendment, like Dan mentioned.
They don't have any control.
It's not going to happen. Okay.
They have no authority of this meeting. The only thing that Congress has is they get to set the date and time, and then when it's over, they get to decide whether or not the states do this by an election or by convention. And the only time it's ever been done by state ballot was when they reversed prohibition. The rest of the time it's been done by convention of the state legislatures. So the likelihood of them being involved in this is zero, other than setting the time and place. And what I would wager is that they'll set the time and place to be in Washington, and most of the members will move it to Kansas City or Oklahoma City or Omaha or Wyoming or somewhere outside of that cesspool in Washington.
Well, when do you what's the time frame on something like this? We got 12 states, you said, Senator. You got to get a bunch still on board. You have any idea, any prediction of when something like this could go down?
Well, it depends on how many people get behind it. We have 7 U.S. senators backing it right now because they see that Washington's dysfunctional. People are more interested in getting reelected than they are in fixing the problems of the country. So it depends. You know, if all of a sudden we get another 10 senators and 100 representatives say, we got to do this. This needs to happen if we're going to function. Because nothing's happening in the U.S. Senate. Not anything of consequence is happening in the U.S. House. Where we are, I explain this in the book. Our founders talked about factions. And the one thing that worried them the most is that the politicians would use factions to divide our country. Guess what? We're there.
No doubt about that.
And the factions are being made worse because of the politicians. Where's the leader with visionary leadership that says we need to reconcile in our country and work as one group of Americans for the betterment of our kids, for the betterment of our future, and the betterment of our economic situation? It's not there. And so we're already where our founders worried, and that's why they put this in there, is so that we could counter the factionalization and actually restore. Remember, what we're trying to do isn't anything that's revolutionary. We're trying to restore the rights of the states and the limitations of the federal government to what it was intended to be when the Constitution was written, before federal judges started tearing it apart.
Now, another thing you kind of wonder about, just the state of our country now, with you have all these statues and stuff being torn down, and we have never been so split on ideological levels, I think, ever. In this kind of environment, do you think this is possible, Senator?
Sure, but you're talking about factions. I mean, we're right where our founders worried for us to be. Sure, it's possible. We're the freest country in the world except for economic freedom. We're now 17th in the world, and for 200 years we were number 1. So when people say, well, why aren't we growing at 3 or 4%, it's because we have a government that just smothers innovation, new business creation, and job creation. So can we do this? Absolutely. But it requires us, individual citizens, to get up and be active. You can't complain anymore, but you now have a tool with which to restore the balance of power between the branches of the federal government and the states and the federal government. And the real big question, what the Convention of States is designed to address, is who gets to decide the future? Is it the elites in Washington? Is it the bureaucrats, the 3 million bureaucrats that work for the federal government? Do they get to decide our future? Or do we as Americans get to decide our future? And will we collectively stand up and say, we'd like to make more decisions at the state level? Right. Thank you, but you haven't done a very good job in Washington, and the federalism and under our republic was supposed to establish most of those decisions at the state, and you've usurped that. So thank you very much. We think we'll return a lot of that decision-making to us as it was intended to be.
Hey,
and so I think we can do this. How fast will it happen? I don't know. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to get it done because it's the only solutions that's big enough for the problem that we have.
Dan, let me ask you, in Wyoming, how much of the problem with the Convention of States is just educating people exactly what it is? Do you think that's probably more than half the battle for people understanding? Because, when you hear the senator explain it and you explain it, it's like, this is a no-brainer. I mean, let's do it. I mean, how much is the battle of just making people understand what it is, you think, in Wyoming?
I think that is the big battle. Just get people to understand how a Convention of States would go. What we can do, we do need to get the control of the federal government back to the states. Where is it easiest for the citizens to speak to their legislators? And that's to us state legislators, because our phone number's out, our email's out. I mean, you can text us. We're all available.
We know your home address.
That's right. They know where you live. And that's sometimes pretty scary. No, that is good. It is very good. They can call you up and go have a cup of coffee. And you can't do that at the federal level, that's for sure. But education is so important.
Senator, one other thought, too, about, and just play devil's advocate here, if something like this happens, there is a convention, what's to say that nothing gets accomplished, or how does that work? Do they have to stay till something gets accomplished, or is it going to be another example of Washington, nothing gets accomplished?
Well, I don't think that'll happen. If you look at who controls the state legislatures throughout the country, all it requires is a simple majority of this convention to send an amendment to the states. So the states each get one vote. So if you have 34 states that says we think we ought to do that, and so what are the amendments that would come out of a balanced budget? What we actually call it is fiscal restraint, management to quit spending money on things you don't need with money you don't have. So what would be the amendment, and what are the characteristics of a balanced budget amendment? I like the ones that Wyoming has passed. I think it's great. And then on scope and jurisdiction, what would that be? What would that look like? One would be restoring the Commerce Clause to what it would be intended to do, because the Department of Education controls 60% of Wyoming's education budget. And the way they do it is through this expansive decision of the Supreme Court in 1931 that says they can. If you look at all the things that the Department of Interior comes in and tells Wyoming what they will and won't do, the only way they can do that is because the Commerce Clause has been prostituted. And it came from a case where a guy grew 18 acres more wheat than they said he should. He didn't sell any of it across state lines, but he used all of it to feed his own cattle, feed his own family, and to plant the next year, and they said that was interstate commerce.
Wow.
And that's never been reversed. So it depends on what comes out, but the fact is once they establish the rules, and they have to have a majority to establish those rules, and then what they have to do is vote. They'll go to committees on all these three subject matters and figure out what they agree, and then whatever comes out of there, the Congress has to send, if it's within the parameters of the application, has to send to the states. And the states get 7 years to decide whether or not they agree with that. And if you have 34 states that have already voted to do this, the likelihood of getting to 38 is pretty good on things that will actually fix our country.
And it's at that point it becomes part of the Constitution, or how does that work?
Yes, it becomes an amendment to the Constitution. Remember, we lost control with the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, which said we will now, through popular vote, elect our senators.
Yep.
Well, our state legislatures then lost control of the federal government, because beforehand, when a senator would vote not in the interest of federalism and maintaining power at the state level, you know what they do? They jerk them right out of Washington and say, you're no longer our senator.
Right.
Because you're not protecting the interests of our state and the freedom of our state. And that's gone with the 17th Amendment. And so what we can do is reestablish the rights of the states through this amendments convention. You don't have to necessarily reverse the 17th Amendment. It'd probably be very hard to do that. But you can certainly restore the power to the state legislatures, which is where it ought to be, where representative government can be most influenced, and where we can make the decisions for the people in our states that are best for our states, not best for some federal bureaucrat in Washington.
Just to recap, if there was a convention of states, the three issues that would be addressed would be a balanced budget amendment, limits to the scope and jurisdiction of the federal government, you said, and then putting term limits on not just elected but also appointed federal officials. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and those are the three. And anything you want to add to that, Dan, that we're talking about?
Definitely on the one subject, the balanced budget amendment, we'd want to say fiscal restraint.
Fiscal restraint.
Right.
Okay.
Right. right.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break on Speak Your Piece. If you'd like to join the conversation today, we're talking about the Convention of States with State Representative Dan Laursen of Powell and former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. Give us a call, 587-1400. We'll be back with more Speak Your Piece right after these messages. We are back on Speak Your Piece. Thanks for staying with us. I am Darren Dudrick, visiting with State Representative Dan Laursen of Powell, along with former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn from Oklahoma. We're talking about the Convention of States. If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call, 587-1400. Senator, we touched on this a little bit last segment, but it's probably good to reiterate because I think this is one of the obstacles. I know that you and Dan face trying to get this thing rolling or keep on rolling is just people are afraid to open up the Constitution, and they use that term "open up the Constitution." But what can you say about that?
Well, I think, look, everybody agrees we're in trouble. No matter who you ask, unless they've had their head in the sand for the last 2 or 3 years, they know fiscally we're in trouble, leadership-wise we're in trouble, spiritually-wise we're in trouble, family-wise we're in trouble. So here's my statement to them. If you've got a better idea on how to fix our country, I'll come help you. I'll abandon this in a New York minute and come help you. But this country was built on the basis of courage, not fear. And the people that are spouting the fear of this are the people who actually like the status quo. They're the people that might even benefit out of the status quo. So when you hear people say this is too dangerous, what is dangerous is we have a runaway federal government today that's out of control, that has mortgaged not just the future of our children, but of our grandchildren and their children. And ask yourself, who's fixing the problems, the real disease, not the symptoms. As a doctor, I was trained to fix disease, not treat symptoms. And if you treat the disease, you have to do something like this to restore the intention of our founders in terms of our freedoms. And so, to me, this isn't dangerous at all. Not doing something is highly dangerous. So what I would say to all those that oppose this, that think that we shouldn't do anything, tell me what you would do and what you're going to say to our children and grandchildren when they're living in poverty. Because there's no way you can take that $144 trillion divided by the 85 million millennials and say they can have any standard of living whatsoever compared to what we're having. It just won't. It can't happen. It's a mathematical impossibility. And who's working to fix those things in Washington? Nobody. So tell me what you would do, and if you've got a plan that's better than this one, I'll come join you.
Senator, you 16 years in D.C., serving the country and serving the state of Oklahoma. What's one of the most frustrating things that there's probably a laundry list of stuff that you can tell us, but anything particular that really stuck out to you to this day motivates you to get something like this done?
Sure, yeah, just a couple of things. Remember the Bridge to Nowhere?
Oh, yeah.
I authored that amendment. I got so beat up by all the members of the Senate. I had 12 people vote with me. If you ask them today if they voted for that, they'll all tell you yes. Of course I did. So the fact is, what really bothers me and why I left is I didn't see any backbone and courage in the members of Congress that were there. Now, there's some, but I'd say 75% are there because they like the position of power rather than loving our country. And right. To me, it cost me the best years of my life in terms of my earning power. Every year I was there, my net worth went down significantly because I had to support a family and kids in college and things like that. And so I asked the question, how somebody like Harry Reid leave Congress worth $36 million when he was worth $300,000 when he went in?
Interesting.
How'd that happen?
That's a good question.
The question is, what are we going to do about it? You can't complain anymore if you're not willing to work on it. If you have a solution that's better, I've just volunteered to be on your team and leave the team I'm on now. But if we don't fix it, then we're going to go down in history like every other republic, and I think America can cheat history. I think we're built of the kind of mix of people. We're Americans. We're not African Americans. We're not conservative Americans. We're not liberal Americans. We're Americans. And we have a real challenge in front of us. That's the biggest challenge this country has ever faced in terms of our fiscal challenges, in terms of our cultural. And we need real leadership to filter to the top and say, let's go on. Let's reconcile these big differences that we have that keep us divided. Let's make sacrifices. Let's demonstrate leadership, servant leadership to the people around us so that we can actually heal our country.
Dan, there's some people in Wyoming that are involved in this, and maybe some contacts if those listening want to be a part of this convention of states.
Yes, I definitely encourage everyone to get involved. Go on the webpage, conventionofstates.com. Contact your local representative and senator and encourage them to pursue this. There is a state director, his name in Wyoming. His name's Rod Gale. And I'm going to put his phone number out. I know he wouldn't object to this. It's 307-343-4693. And I'll mention that one more time. 343-4693.
And his name is Rod, you said?
Rod, yes, Rod
Okay.
Gale. And get a hold of Rod and tell him you want to get involved and be part of the grassroots efforts in your community and support this.
Dan, what's the next step for yourself and others in Wyoming that support this to get more people aboard and maybe educate people more? What are some of the things you're going to be trying to do here in the near future?
Well, I know there's other representatives being on the radio. Scott Clem was on in Gillette talking about this same subject. Rod was with him. We just need to get it out on the radio, in the papers, get people involved, and get them to get a hold of their legislators.
We're also going to send the book "Smashing the D.C. Republic" using Article 5 to restore freedom to every one of the legislators in the country.
Wow!
So that they can actually read the book and say, here's all the questions that I had, and here's the answers to them, and they've been thoroughly researched, footnoted, and all the legal minds that have looked at this say this is exactly what we need to do. So anyhow, they're all going to have it. So they're not going to have any excuse. If they don't want to do it, it's on the basis of fear. And that's a heck of a way to lead.
Hey, Senator, specifically in your book, or what are some of the things you can tell us, maybe some highlights that people may want to watch for when they get that book, if they want to decide they want to buy the book, or why they should buy the book?
Well, it tells all our history of how we used conventions to do everything before the Constitutional Convention, and how they laid out how we should do this in the future. And it gives the history. It talks about Madison, talks about all the people that were in the Constitution. Then it talks about how we do it, what the procedure is for it, why it's safe, where all the complaints are that says this isn't safe, and the answers to all those questions. It lays it out. So if you read the book, you can't have fear.
You got 12 states aboard, and you got some. How many pending? You said.
Well, we have it filed in 36 other states.
Wow.
So we have 48 states total access, and I suspect we'll pass 8 or 9 this next year. And when we get to that, we don't even have to get to 34 states. We get to 28 or 29 states, Congress is going to say, hey, they're coming to take our power away.
That's right.
They're coming to restore the power back to the states. We better be busy about doing what the states want. And I'm talking about all the states. I mean, it harms every state when we have a $490 billion deficit that they say we had last year. And then when you look at how much the debt went up, it went up $1.6 trillion. Where's that accounting? And then the unfunded liabilities rose $7 trillion. Well, wait a minute. Those numbers don't add up, gentlemen. And so, to reestablish control in our country instead of it running amok. And I'm talking about both parties, by the way.
That's for sure. Dan, do you want to add something there, Dan?
I just don't know if people really realize what $20 trillion is. It's 20 million. And we can't even fathom 20 million, hardly.
That's,
one quick anecdote to help people with those numbers.
Sure.
If you earn $40,000 a year, it takes you 25 years to earn $1 million. It takes you 25,000 years to earn $1 billion. So now you know what $1 billion is.
That's just
25 million to get $1 trillion.
That's like, I can't do 1 + 1, let alone that kind of math. That's insane.
It's insane.
So, Senator, what do you have left on your agenda for this whole thing? What's coming up for you to help promote convention of states? What do you plan on doing from this point forward?
Well, I was in 27 states last year. I'll probably be in another 24. Former Senator Jim DeMint has joined us.
Yep.
And he'll be traveling, taking some of the travel requirements off of me, so I don't have to be gone all the time. But we're going to be in every state legislature, talking to every state legislator, saying, do you really want to continue to answer to an unelected bureaucrat on how you make decisions in your state?
Yeah, we got about 30 seconds left. Dan, I'll give you the last word. Just the website again and a phone number if you want for people, if they want more information or if they want to join this cause.
You bet. I'll give that phone number one more time. Rod Gill, our state director, 343-4693. Go on the conventionestates.com. Be a member there. Donate some money and get the grassroots started.
And talk to your local legislators and
definitely
and get them aboard. And say, Senator Coburn, I appreciate the time. I know it sounds like you're retired, but you're still busy. So I know you're busy. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it. Go Wyoming Cowboys.
Hey, thanks. And Dan, thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.